I heard something a little bit ago that really struck me. Special needs kids grow up to be special needs adults. Some special needs kids never get the help they need until they are an adult and then find out that they were special needs and not whatever they were told they were before. I am someone who found out that I was a special needs person due to my autism in my 20s. Before then, I'd been living under a false diagnosis and was what they called learning disabled, except that diagnosis was false and repeatedly used as an excuse to undermine my experiences and emotions, to the extent that when I finally got my accurate diagnosis of autism, I still had one former influence in my life trying to believe that I was still bipolar because they'd been using that as an excuse for some of their abuse, possibly unknowns to them, possibly known to them, but I'm not bipolar. All of my symptoms fall under the umbrella of autism. Some of them are also related more to like OCD, ADHD, and CPTSD, which I also have a diagnosis for two of those. And the OCD one, they told me when I got my autism diagnosis that my OCD symptoms were from my autism, so I didn't need that separate diagnosis because it was part of, like, too connected with it or something. But the other ones I've been separately diagnosed with. So I usually just say I'm autistic ADHD and have CPTSD as well, because there's an overlap between all of these things, but you can actually have all of them separately as well. That is, but yeah, I didn't know any of this stuff growing up. I didn't know I was special needs. People would say I was like weird or quirky, or I never really fit in, but I didn't know why. And when I found out why, when I got my diagnosis, it was like grieving. It was really like grieving, because it was grieving. Because I had to accept that everything I'd ever been told about myself had to be a lie. It had to be a lie. I couldn't believe it anymore. Because knowing for a fact that I wasn't just, as people had told me, overreacting or making it up or whatever, any excuses people had been using to further push me into a corner and keep me masked, finally having a doctor listen to me and a doctor trust me and see me for who I really was, an autistic adult, rather than my false diagnosis I'd had before, a special needs person, and who didn't expect me to pretend to be someone I'm not. That moment changed everything for me. Because after I got that diagnosis, I knew that everything I'd ever been told about myself was a lie, and that the people believed in that lie, but it didn't make it not a lie for me, and that I tried to get them to see why I couldn't. I had to be me, but the problem was taking the mask down made a lot of things worse, because accepting myself as who I really was cost me my family, who I've been exiled from, in a way, at least one member. But despite the hard parts that came after getting diagnosed, I don't regret it at all. There are some people who choose not to get a diagnosis, who know they're autistic, and personally, as someone who is diagnosed, I support that because I understand it. But for me, I needed the diagnosis because I couldn't keep pretending to be someone I'm not anymore. So I got my diagnosis at 20, and then I came out as my true self about a year later, because after I got my diagnosis, it made me question everything I'd ever been told about anything. And it recontextualized for me everything about myself and my past. It changed everything, because suddenly I had this other lens to view my experiences through. I wasn't just this weird, quirky kid. I was an autistic child who was struggling and suffering, and nobody cared because it wasn't diagnosed. Nobody gave a shit because I wasn't diagnosed. And then when I got my diagnosis, instead of finally having the relief and acceptance of my loved ones that I had craved my entire life, they told me I was using it as an excuse, and the person I trusted the most cut me out within it, like a year later. A year and some months later. It had not even been a year of me being out as Max before they'd just pretty much given up on me and thrown me out. But I guess where I started from, it's true. Special needs kids grow up to be special needs adults, but not all special needs kids are diagnosed or seen, and the ones who aren't live invisible until they are.